You wake up and try to do everything right. You eat less, train harder, cut out sugar and carbohydrates. You follow every rule you were ever taught about fat loss, and yet that stubborn belly fat remains, day after day, unchanged. Frustrating, but not your fault. Because fat loss does not begin in the gym. It does not even begin with food. The real decision is made in the very first hour after you wake up, before breakfast, before movement, before you consciously start your day. Your body makes a fundamental choice: burn energy or store it. The moment your eyes open, your brain activates a hormonal response known as the cortisol awakening response. Biologically, this makes sense. It is designed to wake you up, sharpen focus, and provide energy for the day. But when this moment is accompanied by stress, rushing, checking your phone, immediate caffeine, the brain interprets the situation as danger. Cortisol rises, the body switches into survival mode, and this is when it begins to hold on to energy, especially visceral fat, the fat that sits deep in the abdomen, surrounds the organs, and is highly sensitive to stress hormones. Even if you eat well or exercise later, your metabolism has already been programmed for the day: store instead of burn. And here lies a striking contradiction. In Japan, people eat rice and noodles every day. Carbohydrates are a normal part of daily life, yet obesity rates remain relatively low, not because they diet harder, not because they exercise more, but because they protect something that many modern morning routines have lost: calm in the first minutes of the day. What happens to your nervous system and hormones during this brief window can determine whether your body releases fat or holds onto it for years.
Cortisol is often portrayed as a bad hormone. Biologically, that is incorrect. Cortisol is a survival hormone. For hundreds of thousands of years, it helped humans wake up, become alert, and mobilize energy. Without cortisol, there would be no drive, no awareness, no ability to act. The problem is not cortisol itself. The problem is when and how long it stays active. In a healthy body, cortisol rises slightly in the morning to provide energy, then gradually declines throughout the day. This rhythm is governed by the brain's internal clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It synchronizes hormones with light, sleep, and the perception of safety or danger in the environment. When this rhythm is disrupted, cortisol loses its original function. A brief start signal turns into a persistent stress state. And in this state, the body changes its priorities. Visceral fat, the fat deep in the abdominal cavity, surrounding the liver and intestines, plays a special role. It contains significantly more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat. This means it reacts especially strongly to stress. When cortisol rises, the body receives an ancient message: the environment is unsafe. Energy must be protected. In that moment, fat is not released, it is held. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. When danger threatens, aesthetics do not matter, survival does. Visceral fat serves as a rapidly available energy reserve for crises. That is why under stress, the body deliberately blocks fat loss, even if food intake is low or training is intense later in the day. What many people overlook is this: this biological decision is not made when you eat. It is not made when you train. It is made very early, in the morning. In the first minutes after waking, the brain evaluates the situation. Is this day safe or dangerous? Rush, immediate stimulation, caffeine, digital overload. All of these can be interpreted as stress signals. And if those signals dominate, the metabolism switches into storage mode for the entire day. The consequences are measurable. Insulin sensitivity drops. Fat oxidation is suppressed. The body operates defensively, even with moderate calorie intake. But there is another path. When the nervous system perceives safety in the morning, cortisol rises in a controlled manner and then falls again. The parasympathetic nervous system takes over. In this state, energy is released rather than stored. Fat burning becomes a natural consequence, not a struggle. Here lies a quiet but critical difference between modern morning routines and traditional lifestyles. In Japan, many days begin more calmly, more structured, and with less neural overload, not by chance, but as a cultural adaptation to biological rhythms. So the real question is not what you eat or how hard you train. The real question is, what signals do you send your body in the first minutes of the day? To understand this, we need to examine the time after waking, step by step.
The first 30 minutes after waking are more decisive for metabolism than most people realize. During this short window, the body is in a transitional state between sleep and activity, between recovery and stress. The nervous system is especially receptive to signals here. After 7 to 8 hours of sleep, the body is mildly dehydrated. Simply through breathing and evaporation, water is lost. Blood becomes thicker. The heart has to work harder, and this purely physical stress is enough to push cortisol higher before the day has even begun. At the same time, the adrenal glands take control. They regulate cortisol release and respond extremely sensitively to the body's internal state. If fluids are lacking, if minerals like sodium and potassium are low, the adrenals interpret this as strain. The body remains on alert. Many people unknowingly worsen this state. The first thing they reach for in the morning is coffee. Caffeine directly stimulates the nervous system and forces the adrenals to release additional cortisol. In an already dehydrated body, this stimulus acts like an accelerator on a system that actually needs stability. Biologically, the brain receives a clear message. The situation is unsafe. Energy must be conserved. But this is exactly where the course of the day can be altered. When the body is rehydrated first, the hormonal response changes. Fluid thins the blood, reduces strain on the heart, and lowers physiological stress. Even more important are electrolytes. Sodium and potassium are not just minerals, they are essential signals for the nervous system. They convey stability, order, and safety. A large glass of room temperature water with a small amount of salt is often enough to trigger this effect. To the brain, this signals basic needs are met. The danger has passed. In this state, cortisol does not continue rising, it begins to fall. The sympathetic nervous system, responsible for fight or flight, recedes. The parasympathetic system takes over. The body shifts from survival mode into energy release mode. This shift is quiet but profound, because only when the nervous system signals calm does visceral fat stop being treated as an emergency reserve and become available energy. Fat loss does not begin through pressure, it begins through safety. Traditional Japanese morning routines emphasize exactly this calm transition. No rushed start, no immediate stimulation. The day begins with stabilization, not acceleration, and that protects the natural cortisol rhythm. But hydration alone is not enough. The body does not rely only on internal signals, it also orients itself to the environment, and one of the strongest signals of safety and rhythm is light. What comes next determines whether the hormonal tempo for the rest of the day stays aligned or falls out of balance. After the first internal stabilization, the body turns its attention outward. Now the brain looks for orientation, not food, not movement, but a signal that has remained unchanged for millions of years: light. Deep in the brain lies a tiny structure, barely the size of a grain of rice, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It is the conductor of the internal clock. From here, decisions are made about when cortisol rises, when it falls, when melatonin is suppressed, and when energy is released or conserved. This conductor responds especially strongly to one thing: real daylight. When natural light reaches the eyes within the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking, the brain receives a clear message. The day has begun. The environment is predictable. The rhythm is intact. In response, cortisol rises once more, cleanly, controlled, and briefly, and then reliably declines. This pattern is critical. A short morning cortisol rise is healthy. It provides focus, alertness, and motivation. But only the subsequent decline opens the window for fat burning and metabolic flexibility. If this light signal is missing, the system destabilizes. Artificial light, screens, or LED lamps do not provide a clear time signal to the brain. They are too weak, too uniform, too unnatural. Instead of synchronization, confusion arises. Cortisol remains elevated. Fatigue and inner tension coexist. The body feels exhausted, yet remains in stress mode. The result is a state many people recognize: tired but wired, hungry but not truly depleted, active but inefficient. In this state, visceral fat is not released. It stays locked. The solution is surprisingly simple. 5 to 10 minutes of real daylight, ideally outdoors without sunglasses, are enough to reset the internal clock. The retina sends the signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Serotonin rises, melatonin is suppressed,
cortisol reaches its natural peak and then begins to fall. This decline is the true objective, because only when cortisol drops does the body stop interpreting the day as a threat and start seeing it as manageable. The metabolism shifts, energy becomes available, fat burning becomes possible. In many traditional cultures, this step was automatic. The day began outdoors, with light, with movement, with orientation. Modern routines have replaced this signal with screens, emails, and artificial stimuli. But the body does not distinguish between past and present. It responds only to signals. And when this signal is missing, the metabolism remains defensive, regardless of what is eaten or how hard one trains later. Yet even when light stabilizes the rhythm, there is another stimulus that can quietly sabotage the cortisol curve, one many people consider harmless, but which shapes the entire morning. It is what most people expect immediately after waking.
At this stage, the body often feels ready for the next stimulus, awake enough to act, tired enough to reach for a boost. For many people, that boost is automatic, caffeine. But biologically, this moment is delicate. During sleep, a substance called adenosine accumulates in the brain. Adenosine is not waste, it is a regulatory signal. It indicates how much the brain has been taxed and how much recovery is still needed. Even after waking, some adenosine remains active. When coffee is consumed immediately, something crucial happens. Caffeine does not remove adenosine, it merely blocks its receptors. The brain temporarily feels awake, sharp, and capable, but the underlying signal remains. Adenosine continues to accumulate in the background, unseen, unresolved. When the caffeine wears off, this signal returns with greater intensity. The so-called caffeine crash sets in. Fatigue, irritability, and loss of focus appear suddenly, and the brain interprets this as renewed stress. The response is predictable. Cortisol rises again. This creates a hormonal loop that defines the entire morning. Artificial alertness, followed by stress, followed by more stimulation. For metabolism, this means instability. For fat burning, it means blockade. When caffeine is delayed, about 60 to 90 minutes after waking, the brain has time to naturally clear adenosine. Cortisol can reach its morning peak and then decline. The rhythm stabilizes. In this state, coffee acts differently. It enhances alertness without inducing stress. Energy rises smoothly. There is no crash. Most importantly, cortisol remains controlled. The body stays in energy release mode, not defense. This difference is subtle but measurable. Studies on circadian rhythms show that delayed caffeine intake disrupts the natural cortisol cycle less and improves metabolic flexibility, not through avoidance, but through timing. In many traditional lifestyles, this rhythm was intuitively respected. Activity came before stimulation, orientation before acceleration. Modern routines have reversed this order. But the body does not respond to habits, it responds to signals. When those signals communicate calm, safety, and order, energy is released. When they create haste and artificial alertness, energy is stored, especially as visceral fat. Still, one decisive factor remains, often underestimated, one that has nothing to do with food, light, or caffeine, but with movement. Not intense movement, but movement that speaks directly to the brain.
After the internal signals comes one from the external world, older than any training method and more powerful than any calorie. Movement. But not all movement speaks the same language to the brain. Many people believe fat burning in the morning requires intensity, fast intervals, HIIT, strain. But for a nervous system still stabilizing its rhythm, high intensity means one thing above all: additional stress. And stress locks energy away. The brain does not distinguish between modern exercise and ancient danger. Elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, muscular tension, all of these can be interpreted as threat if the system is not yet regulated. The outcome is predictable. Cortisol rises again, and the body remains in storage mode. But there is a form of movement that sends a completely different message: walking. When you walk, something unique happens. As the body moves forward, the environment slides laterally across the visual field. This visual input is known as optic flow, and it acts directly on the amygdala, the brain's fear and alarm center. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense. In human history, controlled forward walking meant the environment is safe, no immediate threat, time to explore, time to think, time to release energy. When the amygdala receives this signal, its activity decreases, and with it, cortisol drops. A calm walk of just 10 to 15 minutes, ideally outdoors in natural light, is enough to trigger this response. No goal,
No pace, no workout, just steady movement. At this moment, something decisive occurs. The nervous system fully shifts from alarm mode into regulation. The body receives permission to release stored energy. Visceral fat loses its status as an emergency reserve. Neurobiological studies confirm this effect. Gentle, rhythmic movement reduces stress markers more effectively than intense exertion in an already activated system. Fat burning is not forced, it is enabled. In many traditional cultures, this step was automatic. The day began with walking, with distance, with spatial orientation. Only afterward came work, effort, and speed. Modern routines have reversed this order. But the body does not respond to calendars or to-do lists. It responds to safety. When movement signals safety, metabolism opens. When it signals stress, metabolism closes. Still, there is one final stimulus that can sabotage the entire morning, even if everything else is done correctly. A stimulus that is not physical, but mental. One that can activate the stress axis within seconds. It lies right next to the bed.
There is one final morning stimulus that can undo all previous signals within seconds. It is quiet, it is every day, and almost everyone reaches for it instinctively. The smartphone. The moment your eyes land on the screen, something crucial happens in the brain. Not because of the content itself, but because of unpredictability. Messages, notifications, emails, social cues. The brain does not know what comes next, and uncertainty activates the stress axis. Neurobiologically, the smartphone in the morning acts like a constant mini-alarm. Dopamine is released, not as reward, but as a search signal. Attention is pulled outward, control is lost. The body subtly enters a state of heightened vigilance. Cortisol rises, not explosively, but gradually. And that is exactly what makes it dangerous, because slow, creeping stress is stored by the body not as an exception, but as a baseline. For metabolism, this means secure energy, hold reserves. Visceral fat remains untouched. Traditionally, mornings unfolded differently. Humans woke up, oriented themselves in space, perceived light, moved, before consuming information. The nervous system set the rhythm, not external stimuli. When information precedes regulation, the body loses its sense of safety. That is why avoiding the smartphone during the first 30 minutes after waking is not a lifestyle trick, but a neuroendocrine protective mechanism. During this time, cortisol, insulin, and dopamine stabilize. The body recognizes there is no immediate demand for action, and only then is fat released, not through willpower, not through discipline, but through the correct timing of signals. When the morning communicates safety, metabolism follows automatically. Fat burning becomes a side effect of a regulated nervous system, not the goal of a fight. This is not a hack, it is biology. And this is exactly why the so-called Japanese way works so effectively. It does not force the body to change, it simply removes the signals that prevent it from doing so.